Teachers, what is the worst thing you've seen a student do? A different type of bad than most of these. I was a teacher at a poor inner-city school. I had a lot of wonderful students, but some difficult ones. One was the worst. Clearly bright, but was always sleeping through class and acting up and never doing homework. I lived about 30 minutes away. One night I stopped by the local Wawa after night out with friends. It was at least 11:30 p.m. and I was already dreading the early morning drive to school. And who should be checking me out but my own problem student? He was working late to make money for his family, getting home at 1 a.m. or later before heading into school on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. He was a smart kid, really, really smart. I hope things worked out for him, but I can't help but wonder what would have happened if he'd been allowed to have a childhood and focus on his education. Next story. Early years educator specializing in children with SEN, special educational needs. Eating feces, no competition. Seeing a child chewing their own crap is something that stays with you. Having to try and hook it all out of their mouth with your finger whilst they bite you is something you forcibly forget. Children with complex sensory issues, particularly those with hyposensitivity to smell and taste, will often seek out particularly strong smells and tastes in things that we find disgusting, but they're not to them and instead are stimulating. Combined with the delays to their development, which means they're still likely to be at the stage of exploration where everything is tested in the mouth, this can obviously lead to situations that are very unpleasant to us. Next story. Stab another student in the back of the head with a pencil. Went in right at the base of the skull. Luckily, it didn't hit anything important and just needed 3 stitches, but it was deep enough that it stayed in before the doctors took it out. Next story. There was a loud pop and flash in the back corner of the classroom. I asked the student sitting there what happened. She said it was firecrackers and I sent her to the office. While she was still in the office, I realized the electrical outlets in the room didn't work. At that point, another student fessed up that the student sent to the office had put a pair of scissors in the outlet. I'm not sure why the student thought it was a better lie to claim she was doing fireworks inside the school, though. Depending on how young these kids are, I get it. You know you're not supposed to be doing something when an adult asks, "What did you do?" So you lie. And I'm sure in that moment any lie sounds better than whatever it was you were actually doing. However, sometimes you come up with a lie that is just, worse. Definitely something I did as a kid. Next story. I was teaching for 3 months in a terrible inner-city school in London, UK. Terrible because the school's management was ridiculous and refused protecting or standing up for their teachers. I quit after 3 months at the end of the first term. The school begged me to stay and promised me a pay increase. Here are some highlights. A female 15-year-old student pulled out a used tampon from her kitty during class and chucked it on my colleague's face, telling her to shut the hell up. A 16-year-old female student spat on my face while calling me a slur. The school's head teacher put her in detention for an hour as punishment while the student was laughing at me, saying, "You see, all I got is a free lesson, now screw off." The school refused to suspend her and to let me know that if I call the police to charge her with assault, they will support the student, refusing to acknowledge the attack. This was to protect the school's reputation, they say. A male student smeared his feces on a huge wall in the boys' toilet, writing crap with it. A group of 6 or 7 students, 16 to 17 years old, surrounded a male colleague, pushing him from one to another, took his glasses, very high prescription, rendering him practically blind, breaking them, then beating and kicking him. The school refused to investigate as he couldn't identify any of the students. He couldn't see the faces without his glasses. He quit the school the same day. This place was a nightmare. Next story. When I was teaching preschool, I had a little girl between 3 and 4 walk up to another girl who was sitting on the rug reading a book, grab her by the hair, and slam her head into the wall. They hadn't been interacting in any way prior. When I asked her why she did it, she said she, quote, "wanted her to know it hurts." Yeah, you know what, little Samantha? I think she got the message. But maybe we should teach people with our words next time instead. How about that? Next story. I was talking to a kid about Pokemon one day during their lunchtime. I'm the band director and a lot of band kids come into the band room for lunch. We were having a good time. He's a great tuba player and I tell him I can't wait to see him tomorrow. He ended up taking a rope and attempted to take his own life in the last period of the day by kicking a desk out from under him. Luckily, the teacher he was with was able to somehow get to him, but I ran down in time hearing the screaming and was in time to see him there, as others tried to support him enough to keep him from dying. Kid was gotten down, but that was awful. It's so hard to tell sometimes, even when you're right there with them before they try it. Next story. My favorite teacher in high school was a very kind and lenient man. Do your work, be respectful, and follow the major school rules, and you and him would be cool. The one thing that would seem minor, but that he was very strict about, was taking any medication in any way, shape, or form in his classroom. One day I needed to take some Advil for cramps and asked to take it. He said I needed to go to the nurse for permission. I ended up asking him why he's so strict on it. It turns out he had a student pass out in class one day at his former school. He tried to wake her up and called the nurse, but she wouldn't wake up. They called 911, and by the time they got there, she had died of an OD on narcotics she's taken in the bathroom that she had hidden in a Tylenol bottle. I don't know how he went back to teaching after that. Next story. I have a list. The kid who would injure herself if you told her she couldn't leave the room. Now you had to let her get out for first aid. Kid had major issues and was in foster care. The kids that would threaten to accuse a teacher of indecency to get rid of him. They were caught by being overheard in the locker room while they were planning. The first grader so violent he left permanent scars on staff, and the special ed department refused to change his educational setting. He punched me for tying his shoes wrong. The POS that assaulted a blind girl while a substitute sat in an office and not doing anything. The freshman that put a senior through a glass window and broke his nose because the senior wouldn't stop bouncing a ball off the back of the freshman's head. Next story. In no particular order, self-pleasuring in class, pushing a pregnant teacher in the stairs, igniting a senior school administrator office by throwing a trash bin full of lighter fluid while trying to block the door to prevent her escape. Fake gun and real knives, armed robbery. We had the police arrest them inside the school. After a fish dissection, hid a fish by taping it below a desk. It was just before a 2-week holiday. The cleaning staff threw up when opening the class. Throwing a big firework on another student sitting in the toilet. Escort work and drug dealing in the school bathroom. Yup, glad I took that break from education. Opie, I know you said no particular order, but I feel like there has to be some order. You cannot all of a sudden number 3 in the list say, oh yeah, just setting an office on fire and trapping the person inside. I feel like that's gotta be number 1. You cannot bury the lead on that. Next story. My wife has a few. This is only one. During class, one girl was sitting with her hands in her lap, shaped like a bowl. Upon further inspection, I noticed she was collecting her spit in her hands. Said her name, made eye contact. She drinks it and wipes her hands on her shirt. She didn't make a move to ask to wash hands, so I sent her to. Next story. Worst? I had a student bully a kid into transferring schools, but then the bully got voted in as senior class VP. We have a kid who brought a gun, then planted a pipe bomb and more, still in our school. It's important to know if teachers told specifics, we can be fired for breaking privacy laws. Like those stories above can never see the light of day and be associated back to the student. Next story. It's a 3-way tie for me. Student 1. Stole my class pet, a fish that I really loved. Claimed to flush it down the toilet. Another student said they gave it away to a kid on the street in a water bottle. Student 2. Raised their hand in a fist like they were going to hit me when I was visibly pregnant to see me flinch. They repeated this gesture 3 times. I wasn't their teacher. I just asked them to stop banging on random doors and go to class. Student 3. Put his fingers in his throat and forced himself to throw up on my floor. I asked him why he did that. He said to go to the nurse. Why didn't he just ask, though? Why start with forcing yourself to puke on my classroom carpet? I quit teaching. The kids and their parents and the admin are raising a generation that isn't going to understand consequences. We're creating sociopaths. I also grew tired of parents screaming at me for the dumbest reasons. I didn't allow phones out in my classes. Another wanted me to pay for her internet at home. And finally, I was not paid enough, yet I was expected to subsidize the entire education system. Next story. Saw a very sweet 16-year-old girl I taught for 5 years being strangled by her boyfriend in the hallway at school. I was fuming. He got very aggressive with me, yelling in my face it was just a joke and I should chill. As a woman, I also felt really intimidated by this teenage boy. I passed it on to the safeguarding team and I'm not sure how they dealt with it, but I know the girl defended him. He got expelled for something else a few weeks later and told me that they broke up when he was gone. But I still worry about what kinds of relationships she's going to have in the future if she thought his behavior was acceptable. She deserves so much better. Next story. This was the worst thing I know of that happened at my high school. Someone brought a blasting cap to school. Okay, a bit dumb, and flushed it down the toilet. Okay, that's really dumb. Then told the teacher about it because maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Their best idea that day, really. Wound up with the restroom being taken out of service while the fire department x-rayed the plumbing to find and remove the admittedly tiny explosive. Took several weeks before it was back in service. Next story. I taught college English literature and composition for 25 years until I retired a few years ago. I've caught students cheating on exams and plagiarizing quite a few times, at least a couple per semester. During every exam, I had students turn off their phones and place them on their desks face up. I always went around and checked their phones. During one exam, I had a student say she didn't have a phone. She was a single mom who had recently immigrated to the country, so it seemed reasonable she couldn't afford a phone, and it didn't occur to me that she could be lying. She asked me to go to the bathroom during the exam, and I let her go. While she was gone, her name popped up on the course site, and I could see every resource she looked at while she was out of the classroom for about 5 minutes. I let her finish the exam, but wrote to her immediately after, and included the report of everything she'd viewed during the exam from her phone that she apparently didn't have. She claimed that she forgot she had her phone, and when she remembered she did have it, she was embarrassed to admit it. It was in the pocket of her jeans, and that she must have hit the course site when she was pulling down or up her pants because it was the last thing she'd looked at online. I said, "I'm sorry, but I have to forward the evidence to the dean." She said she was going to appeal it. I replied that was fine. It was her right to appeal. Meanwhile, the dean's office contacted me to say that was her third offense. Because it was her third offense, she automatically failed the course. It was sad because she had high enough grades to pass the course before the exam, so even if she'd failed, she would have passed. I think about her often because I admire her so much for restarting her life with a small child in a new country. She would sometimes bring her very young son to class if she couldn't get a babysitter, and she was very attentive to him, and he was very well behaved and never disrupted. It just kind of leaves me wondering why she felt the need to cheat. Surely she knew she was doing all right in the class already. Was it just last-minute nerves about not passing or not doing well on the exam or something? It just feels really unfortunate to me. Third offense, too. Yeah, she's not long for that school, huh? Next story. Probably not the worst in this thread by a long shot, but one that made me despair for their intelligence. Was teaching at a college, and at break, a lad, 18, so technically an adult, was regaling the other kids with the story of the girl at school when they were 14 who, sucked off a dog. Of course, none of them believed him, so he then proceeded to prove it by showing the video that had done rounds at the time, which he still had on his phone. Seemingly, that crap was legit. He then asked me if I wanted to see, and I declined. And then I asked him what he thought would happen if he, an adult, got caught with a video on his phone of an underage girl performing an act on a dog. He said, oh, I never thought of it like that. I suggested, well, maybe you should. And what do you think you're supposed to do about it? Fortunately, he had enough intelligence to delete it, but it never occurred to him that it might not be the best look. Not the best look? Man, you shouldn't have that on your phone to begin with. That's disgusting, dude. Let alone just highly illegal. But come on, man. Next story. Didn't see them do it, but it was such a catastrophe that I heard about it for weeks. The countryside Japanese junior high school I used to work at had one really rough year. When the third years were first and second, they were angels. As third years, they were absolute demons. 4 male students in particular were stereotypical delinquents. They often just walked out of class and wandered the school, smoked out behind the building, and stole/broke a lot of things. It was so bad they had to schedule staff who weren't in class to walk the halls to catch them before they did anything. Well, while the second years were out in the gymnasium for PE, one of the third-year delinquents escaped and went up to their classroom, which had all their uniforms and gear laid out on their desks. He pulled the pin on the room's fire extinguisher and sprayed the entire classroom down in pink foam. Everything was ruined. Next story. Saw a boy stab a girl in the eye with a pencil. Luckily for her, the pencil was blunt and he missed her eyeball and got the bridge of her nose instead. The boy bullied other boys and girls as long as they were smaller than him. I called the principal. The little girl still had the pencil mark on her nose. The boy was taken out of class, but sadly there were no long-term consequences. I think he just got a talking to from the principal. The girl was more surprised than hurt. She didn't even cry, but I was horrified. On another note, I remember Billy. Billy was a good kid, doing well in school. Then his parents decided to make him a boarder at the school. Billy's parents lived so close you could see his house from the school, but he was no longer allowed to go there. He lived in the school now, just like the other boarders, but he could still see his home he was no longer allowed to go to. His behavior went from good to bad. He stopped doing any work and misbehaved all the time. I was a teacher, but I also lived at the school, a private school. One day I walked past Billy, who was sitting on a stair and crying while looking at a picture he held in his hands of his mum and dad. After a few years, he was allowed to be a day boy instead of a boarder. His mum and dad let him go home again, but Billy's personality had changed, possibly permanently. This was about 15 years ago. I hope you're okay now, Billy. I fail to see what the parents thought this would do other than just cause damage to their child. I feel like if you love and want to support your child, it should be pretty well known that you should be there to do so, and they should have a home to go to. Being a boarding student is fine, but in high school, at least a lot of the boarding students at my school, I went to a private school, a lot of them got to go home very frequently to see their parents. And not many, if any, were boarders and lived in the same city. This just seems like a punishment almost. I'm sorry, Billy. Next story. A couple worked in a church daycare and we were open after school kids. Starting with the more serious incidents, there was a boy in our school-age classroom that needed an IEP and a floater because he was prone to violent outbursts. But the parents were refusing to accept that help, so all we could do was keep an eye on him. Usually that was impossible because our school-age teacher was by herself, unless our other classrooms were at ratio, and then I could help her. One of these times I was there, this boy grabbed a pencil and shoved it into another girl's eye. When asked why he did that, he replied he just felt like it. Another incident with this boy, which caused one of my coworkers to quit teaching, was when he football tackled a preschooler. He was big and in 4th grade. He started to beat the crap out of him, causing the teacher to run and basically use physical restraint to keep him away from the kid until parents got there. He was expelled after this. Why wasn't he removed after the first? Well, I'd guess money, because this daycare was on its last legs and was closing in 4 months' time. On a lighter note, preschooler during nap time got up and began sleepwalking, freaked me out by myself in a dark, quiet room until I figured out that's what he was doing. Next story. About 8 years ago, a student was spraying deodorant in class. Teacher asked the student to stop, as she and other students might be asthmatic, and to go outside instead. The student paused for a moment, then sprayed it directly in her face. Teacher had an asthma attack and was taken to hospital. Student was given a stern talking to, but otherwise had no consequences. Next story. Here's a different variation. Even though this is university level, there was a student who blamed a lecturer for the death of her friend, stating that the stress of her class made him have a seizure and die. She then started a campaign and demanded an apology. The lecturer was devastated and ended up quitting. She basically ruined the life of someone, and also kind of disrespected the life and death of her friend and his family, who we were all sad about dying, obviously. Next story. If teaching a college class counts, I once had a student log on for a Zoom meeting, required for part of an assignment at a pool, wearing just a bathing suit. May not sound too bad at first, but it was for a professional development class and the meeting was for a resume review. The secondhand embarrassment was unreal. When I was in college, only graduated myself a couple years prior, I never would have even thought about doing that for a meeting with an instructor. Also, I'm a guy and the student was a girl. Next story. Assault. We had a transfer student in a behavior exchange. Got told he was just a bit rebellious with a mum who liked threatening to sue. Fine. Didn't get all his paperwork, but we needed to get rid of our own baddie, so he was accepted against protests. We had him 3 months before girls began complaining he was assaulting them. He was 13. Finally got his paperwork and learned his real reasons for exclusion from his last school was assault. We worked really hard with him, but his mother limited what we could do. We all knew we'd see him on the news one day. We did twice. Once when the local footy team was about to win the league somewhat unexpectedly and he was interviewed in the street, and again for his conviction. He was 21 by then. Oh, and stabbings. One kid got stabbed and was on life support but pulled through. That's not his fault. He wasn't the kid involved in that crap. He got stabbed protecting a girl whose big brother had caused some beef and she got attacked in a park. He was okay physically, but I hope every day he stayed okay in the head. He was a good kid, really. One kid stabbed another in the head with a pen and the parts had to be removed. One kid slammed my hand in a door and broke it. One kid broke a sand timer into glass shards and tried to stab his teacher with it. That was a wild one to intervene on, only for a few cuts. Worked with young offenders in for murder. Worked with a 6-year-old who was so violent he was being sent to permanent residential care where he would have 5-to-1 escorts because he was so dangerous. He was being sent there because his mom was pregnant and he was fully attacking her belly. Anytime he got near a baby doll, he'd smash and attack it. It was wild. Sad, because he's 6 and he had a lot of disabilities that contributed to his behavior, but this kid was a menace. He had severe speech impediments too, so his language could be hard to understand. Even at 6, we had clearance to apply restraints because he'd fully try and stab you. He was in school but excluded from classrooms because he'd been abusing the nonverbal kids, knowing they can't speak. We worked with him 2-to-1 each day, mostly just managing behaviors. Once working with him, let's call him Josh, had him lovely and settled and working really well and said, "Awesome job, Josh. I'm so proud of you." This kid very coldly turns to me, pupils blown completely so his eyes looked black. Expression not quite blank, but there was anger, but mostly hollow. And he said, as clearly as he ever spoke, the impediments weren't there suddenly, "I'm not Josh. Josh isn't here." "Oh, well, who are you then?" "I'm Billy." "Okay, it's lovely to meet you, Billy. May I ask where Josh is?" "Josh isn't here. He's in the classroom with the other kids." "Is he being good like you?" "No, he's angry. He's going to hurt the teacher, and then he's going to hurt the kids, and then he's going to hurt you." "But Josh is a good boy." "No, he isn't." "Yes, he is. Josh is lovely, like you're lovely." "I'm not lovely. I'm why Josh hurts people." So we went and got a teacher and she asked him and he said similar crap. It was the eyes. Something was wrong in his eyes. An hour later, he was playing away just fine and teacher and me sort of gently asked, "Are you Josh or Billy?" He had no freaking idea who Billy was. No clue. I can't stress how limited this kid's capacity was. He could not lie or make up like this. We saw Billy several times before Josh went to his residential. Josh was challenging because he was so angry and, though small, very strong and hard to control. Billy was more focused. There was intent in what he did to people. Mom reported meeting Billy and being more afraid of him than Josh alone. Now, to be clear, for a child that young to show a possible dissociative episode can mean that the child is being horribly abused. Social was heavily involved with this family, and this all got reported up and noted and recorded. But I've worked with young offenders in on murder charges. I've worked with kids we know are going to be diagnosed psychopaths in due course. To this day, Josh/Billy, that was intense. I hope little man is okay. He'd be a teen now. I hope that residential was good for him. You know, sometimes you hear a story like this and it reminds you that these things are real. For some reason, it's very solidly tucked away in the criminal minds portion of my brain, of like, oh, it's real, but it's fiction, These things happen in stories. Kids aren't really out there, like, fully creating alternate personalities to shield themselves from trauma and hurting other people. But no, they are. I also hope Billy is better now. Next story. Not my class, but a kid in Egypt locked another kid in a cabinet and didn't tell anyone. Took several minutes to find her because he was no help. Might have been faster if she wasn't sobbing silently in the cabinet. Several of us had to help search. This kid was a monster. I heard he stabbed a kid with scissors. School still refused to discipline him because his parents were paying tuition. Next story. The boys in this one class had an extremely strong hierarchy. One of the boys was the king of the hill, and all of the other boys would do anything he said or wanted them to. These boys are 10 years old, by the way. If you asked who was the strongest in the class, all of them would yell out his name, and if someone disagreed, they would attack him and harass him until he agreed that the king of the hill was the strongest. Same goes for smartest, coolest, best looking, everything else you can imagine. He could ask the other students to clean up his desk or bring him something and they would do it instantly. At recess, he was always the team leader, and if you asked which team won at the end, they would simply say his name. I can name countless more times and moments of how strong his leadership was. However, let's get to the bad part. In the dressing room before PE, the leader decided they should all play a game where they strangle each other. This game was that he strangled each and every one of them, and if anyone wanted to play, they could strangle him as well. Of course, nobody dared to do that. So after strangling everyone, a teacher found out about this, and still the boys protected him, saying it didn't hurt and it was a fun game. Horrifying to think of what those children had to go through. Next story. I was a student. In middle school art class, we had a girl slit a guy's throat. I don't know why. Luckily, he survived. She was later found to have a hit list on her, and just about everyone was just lucky she was caught. The stupid thing is, they let her come back to the same school after about 6 months and was put in the same classes as the people she put on her hit list. Next story. Worst or most bizarre? Worst was during a high-stakes exam I was proctoring at a charter school. In dead silence, a student casually walked up to the desk, grabbed a pair of scissors, and stabbed a girl sitting close to the desk. Bizarre happened a few years back. Last block of the day and the kids are coming from gym class. A particular student looked sweaty, like he just got done playing a seriously intense basketball game. Everyone sat down and I went over the daily norms, and suddenly this kid rips his shirt off and starts dancing and kissing everyone in the class. Then he suddenly passed out, and before security could aid me, the paramedics were there. Turns out he was on PCP. Next story. I had a darling little freshman girl in my class whose name was Brianniqua. She was really smart and liked to help other students who were having trouble with assignments. She even came into my room before school and at lunch just to talk sometimes. She was really sweet, which is why I was so stunned when she behaved very differently in another teacher's class one afternoon. I was not present at the time of the incident, but according to others who were there, another girl in the class made a disparaging comment about Bria. Bria made a rude comment back. Then the other girl made a profane threat toward Bria. Bria stood up, walked across the class, grabbed the girl by the head, slammed her face into the desk, and broke her nose. Oh my God. When some of my students came in and told me what had happened, I didn't believe them. She was immediately expelled. I never saw her again. Later, I asked the dean about it, and his story was the same. Next story. I couldn't hold a candle to a lot of what's here, but my school had the following while I was teaching. Grades 8 to 9. Girls sneaking into the bathroom to pierce each other with their own dirty earrings. Student ripped a drinking fountain off the wall. A freshman boy followed me down the halls after hours, threatening to assault me in detail. Special needs students self-pleasuring in class. Students beating the crap out of each other. A white boy threatening to stab all the black kids. A student anonymously submitting a note that he was the next school shooter. All the school bathrooms being locked and monitored because too many kids were smearing their crap all over the walls and ceilings. I don't teach anymore. Next story. University students misbehave too, sadly. A couple of master's pharmacy students at a well-known London university got caught pouring foreign reagents into the lab material of another student. It wiped out the experiment and $10,000 of grant money. They were expelled on grounds of misconduct and fitness to practice, as pharmacy is a clinical course. I was a postdoc there at the time, was shocked then, still find it appalling now over a decade later. Never seen anything like it since, thankfully. I've never had any violent interactions, but I did have a student get increasingly flirty with me once. Well, more than once, but this takes the cake. About 3/4 of the way through the semester, I had to tell her I'm not going to bang a student of mine, college. I failed to make it clear about what my policy was on after the class was over hookups, I guess, because the last day, she showed up to class in a miniskirt and bent over in the aisle between desks to flash her commando privates to me. Just bonkers, she didn't realize how this is not only assault, that I'm married, so what the hell? This is a freaking ethics class. I already told you to get away from me, etc. I've never seen being hot go to someone's head so much. She just obviously had never been told no once in her life. Next story. A student strangled another student. The strangler cried really hard and was left unsupervised to pick up their bag and leave because parents were contacted. The one who got strangled is still alive and possibly scarred for life. They were middle school students at the time. Should be adults now. Next story. As a preschool teacher, I've seen things. Kids in early childhood are deeply affected by everything happening around them. They do some weird stuff. They get violent. It's wild. And yet I still teach. The worst was during my first year of teaching. This was almost 18 years ago. We could never let this boy and girl be in the classroom around each other. We had a tunnel on the playground and we caught them in there one day and they both had their pants down part way. Here's what happened after we interviewed each child separately. The girl told the boy to go in the tunnel with her, then told him to take off his clothes. The boy was scared of her too, and really wanted us to know what had happened. The girl's family was investigated and nothing came of it. In general, this girl was sneaky, and she'd target several kids in the class, like telling them to eat sand or jump off furniture. Looking back on it, as much as I know it's believed kids that age don't have malicious intent, I think she was trying to hurt those kids. I don't think children know what pain feels like for other people, but I also don't think they never try to do something to someone else. Next story. One story is my mother's. In the early 60s, she was teaching a special needs elementary school class. She had a student with a weird name who loved to get electrical shocks. He spit on his fingers and put them on the electrical outlet, and his sister would snitch on him saying, "Miss OP's mom, weird name is getting a shock again." The other is mine. Countryside High School, not the US, in the early 90s. There was a student that all the other students hated. He was a snitch and a bootlicker, and to make it worse, he was having an affair with a very cute middle school teacher, so they decided they would beat him up. In my class, I heard them talking about it and told them not to, which they interpreted as that they could beat him up in the corridor just before my class. So I intervened and physically protected their target. In the melee, one of the other students thought he could land me a punch. I managed to block it and by reflex almost punched him in the face. Thankfully, I stopped 1 centimeter before I crushed his nose. He got scared and apologized with a very white face. Next week, he stayed after all the other students left for recess and pulled a gun, a .38 revolver, on me. I grabbed it away from him, took the ammo out, and put the rounds in my pocket and told him I would keep the ammo, but he had to hide the gun before anyone else saw it, or the headmistress would certainly call the cops, and he would go to jail. He put it back in his backpack, and I told him he should think about the consequences of his acts. It was the second very stupid thing he had done in a very short time. Either he puts his act together, or he would become a petty criminal, always in and out of jail, unable to hold a job and lead a decent life. Later, I learned that his mother was an escort who lived with a guy who had been expelled from the police, so the gun was probably his stepfather's. Some 5 to 8 years later, I was walking down the main avenue in a bigger city 2 hours away from where it had happened. I saw someone run across traffic in my direction. It was that kid, now a young man. He wanted to thank me for what I had done then. He realized he didn't have to go that way, had put his act together, and was working hard and living by himself, having left his tragic early life behind. I was very glad. It's wonderful when we can have a good influence on one of our students. That's the core of being a teacher for me. Next story. I've seen some crap, but nothing compared to the stories from before I joined the school. These were experienced by my colleagues who had been around for a while. I teach at an institute for ages 17 to 20. Kid just straight up self-pleasuring right in the middle of the lesson, not even hiding it. Another kid licks everything he can touch. Another kid digs his butt crack and takes a huge sniff constantly. Next story. Heartbreaking worst thing. In a training visit to an autistic unit, I saw a child rocking in the corner with no life in his eyes. Funny worst things. Put a chocolate bar in the swimming pool and claimed someone had crapped in it. Pool had to be pumped out. Put rubbers on all the door handles of the school. Evil worst things. Run around the school in a pack of thugs and basically destroy everything. We had to call the police. Next story. One lad, A, in the year above me, had an argument with another kid, B, in one of his classes. Something and nothing, and it was assumed that it was over and forgotten about. A couple of weeks later, kid B was seriously injured in a physical fight in the school. It turns out kid A had spent those 2 weeks' worth of metalwork lessons secretly making a knuckle duster, intent on using it in an ambush on kid B. He did indeed use it. Next story. So, as a lighter swap out to the merely gross, I once had a student come to my office and ask me, with some embarrassment, if I could please ask another student to stop taking off his shoes and socks and picking pieces of skin off his feet in class. Students sat in auditorium-style tiers at tables with solid front pieces, so I couldn't see it. This was a university class, by the way. Next story. I'm a teacher, but the worst thing I saw was when I was in 4th grade. A kid threw another kid over a balcony from the 2nd or 3rd story. Not sure because it was actually a ramp on a hill. Special mention for the kid who murdered another kid when I was in 8th grade because I was afraid for my life, so I skipped school, which meant he couldn't cheat off my test. When he found out, he permanently took care of my fears, which, fair, raised a whole new set of fears. Special mention because I didn't see it personally. Next story. Assault me with a weapon. First, they threw sharp shards of pottery at me. One of them hit me. A couple weeks later, they threw large seashells at my head and chest. 3 of them hit me. I quit later that day. That school isn't around anymore. Next story. I started work at a last chance school a few years back. The school itself is a very, very old building, has a historical designation and a plaque and all that. Needless to say, it's falling apart and the student body is reckless and violent, so there are probably more holes in the wall than necessary. It was maybe my 2nd week here and I was getting used to everything that was not like my student teaching experience. We had a student who was in 7th grade, but he hadn't physically or mentally developed past the age of 7. Super adorable little kid. And then I heard his story and Christ, I don't know how any of these kids survive their homes, but this kid had it real bad. Anyway, the kid pulls down his pants, climbs the old electrical piping up the wall until his crotch is paralyzed parallel to one of the holes and just puts his dong in there and starts humping. SRO arrived and took care of the situation, and outside of needing bleach for my eyes and memory after seeing this, everything was fine. The other kids in the class were even grossed out by it, and they were used to this kid. When the student returned to class after suspension, I had a chance to ask him what he was thinking when he acted out like that. His reply was that the hole reminded him of his grandmother, and that's what his grandmother makes him do to her. For real, y'all. Absolutely numb now. Next story. My mom is a special education teacher for middle schoolers. One day after she came home from work, she spent the entire evening crying until she went to bed. I asked her what happened. All she would say is, quote, "A student did something that will change his life forever." And she never elaborated further. I did not ask because clearly she was disturbed by it. But I know it was awful if she reacted like that, especially given the crazy stories she tells us with no concern. Next story. I was student teaching in a tough inner city school. I was in a special education classroom for kids with social emotional disabilities. I saw a 12-year-old boy wrap his hands completely around the neck of a girl and try to choke her out. The teachers and aides had to literally pry his hands off her neck so she could breathe. She had terrible bruising afterward. He was suspended for the rest of the time I was in my placement, which was good, because I was terrified of him after that. Next story. I had a third grader trip over a kid who was sitting on the floor. That kid's fight or flight reflex was triggered and he attacked the kid, was choking him with one hand and trying to take out his eyeball with his thumb with the other. I wrapped my arms around the attacker's waist and pulled him away. He lost his grip but then managed to grab the end of his shirt, so he hand over hand pulled him back to go for more. The other kid did get away. I'm standing in the middle of my music classroom with 48 third graders and my 2 first grade daughters, holding this kid who starts attacking me instead, reaches around and claws at my face, stomps my right foot until he breaks it. Everyone is just staring shocked. I make eye contact with the student and directly order them to go get the coach. This breaks the freeze everyone is in, and the kid attacking finally stops as she runs next door to get coach. This was the last day of school that year. I had that kid every day in my class for 2 more years. I had healed over the summers, so I don't think he had any idea how badly he had hurt me. The kid he attacked transferred schools and I never saw him again. Always wondered if he was okay. I attended the attacker's graduation last year and he seems to be doing well. I mean, this is the outcome we hope, right? Kids, if they're monsters when they're little, still have time to grow. They can grow up and be decent, I don't want to say well-trained, but well-behaved people. At the very least, not attacking and breaking people's feet. I don't want to say this is the job of a teacher because, not exactly in the job description that you're signing off on, that some kid is going to try to break your bones and scratch you up. But when it does come up and it's dealt with like this and the kid gets to grow and learn and not be like this in the future, it is a big win. Sorry about the trauma, OP. It sounds like you handled it quite gracefully, though. So well done. Next story. I've seen some things. I once turned around and saw 2 of my students were strangling each other simultaneously. They literally both had each other at the throats and they were in a death grip. They were completely silent, which is why I didn't notice it at first. They were like 17 years old. I panicked, as you can imagine. As a woman, I didn't feel like I had the strength, so I ran out, saw a big, strong man teacher and told him. He just said, "It's okay," and went in to get them off each other. I never even went in to see the outcome. I just stayed outside until end of class. Another shocking thing that happened in another class. There was a new student, just very sweet, studious, and innocent. His mother told me he still slept with a stuffed toy even though he was like 14. Some boys convinced him to do something bad in the class. His mother, who is also a teacher at the school, wouldn't say what it was, but apparently it was something intimate he did in class, and he was told to leave the school. He ended up going to the school right next to that one, but it was so unfair that he got put out of the school while the boys who corrupted him just stayed in and got no punishment. His mother told me she had the washing on the line and he reached for his school shirt from that school, and she just told him, "You won't be needing that anymore, my boy." And he burst into tears. Next story. Student here. In preschool, I remember there was a student who would climb up to the top of a play structure, took a loose wooden plank, and any other kid who tried to follow him up the ladder got hit in the head with said wooden plank. I had a classmate in elementary school. I caught him watching Aliens, the movie, in class. In elementary school. Those are some freaky movies for adults. Kid had nerves of steel. There was also a student in the same elementary school that threw a rock up in the air for a game and hit his brother in the eye. I didn't play rock toss often, but the goal was you try to chuck a rock as high up on the wall of a 3-story building as you can. The first story is worth 1 point, the second is worth 2, and the third is worth 3 points. There's some arbitrary goal to win, like 20 points. I spent more time playing warrior cats with my friends out in the school field, but those weren't the worst, not by a long shot. That same year, a different student in my class got busted for looking at adult content in class during silent reading time. This was in elementary school. Kid was like 9. In middle school, I dealt with some nasty bullying. Students would smash my laptop on my hands, pour cereal on my desk, steal my action figures, cheat off my assignments, call me slurs, etc. But the worst bullying wasn't towards me. I got lucky. During a school riot, glass was smashed, a fence was knocked over, and a teacher got pushed down the stairs. There were middle school students who would bang in parking lots, according to people I know, though I never saw it myself. One time in a school fight, someone punched a hole in the wall of the library. They covered it with a generic "I love to read" poster, but you could always tell. One time, someone made a gas bomb from a pepper spray container and threw it in the cafeteria during lunch hour. There were 3 arson attempts at the school in 1 year. I lost track after that. One of my classmates would look up pictures of people with the Down syndrome and just laugh at them because they looked different. She actually transferred to the same school as me in high school, but she's not a bad person anymore. Honestly, in high school, nothing really that bad happened. All of the bullies I had in middle school just grew up. Worst I saw was like people smoking weed, and that's not bad compared to any of the other stuff. I cannot tell you how reassuring it is to hear that other kids were playing rock toss and warrior cats at recess. Part of me thought, was that just my weird independent school growing up? And maybe partly, but at least not entirely. Thanks, OP. Really saving me on that one. Anyway, that's the last story for today. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.